Good afternoon and welcome to the AIBD's High Performance Homes team, hosted by the American Institute of Building Design. Got a few people on screen and a bunch in the room with us, the virtual room. I'm Steve Mickley, Executive Director of AIBD, and today's topic to approach is fireproofing our roof overhangs. And I could think of three scenarios where that might come in handy. One is all of our buildings, commercial buildings, have smoking zones now. And where is that smoking zone? Right outside the door, where everybody has to pass by to get in and out of the building. But that's a story for a different day. I know that there has been some studies done, and in commercial the design, they're starting to be the thought process of what to do if somebody throws a butt down and the fire begins on that part of the building, which would be the wall as well as the roof overhang or the portico if it's underneath that kind of structure. Also, there's the wildfires. California, we just had some in South Carolina, actually. And from the research I'm doing, you can build a house that is with cement roof tiles, stucco exterior.
Michael Battaglia.
And
Can you hear
hi,
me?
Paul. Yeah, we can. Hang on.
I can't hear any of y'all.
The exterior can be completely stucco, cement tile, and it can be vented roof attic, which is what the building code requires. And the house can be, ignited from the inside out. So, and then the last one is, this is a new category that's been entered into ARDA, our American Residential Design Awards. And it's building more than one residence on the same piece of property. And so I know that there's a lot of infill being done in the urban areas. A lot of the developments, particularly where I'm at, are being developed with smaller and smaller lots because of the cost of development. And so your setbacks on the side of the house may only be 5 feet in some communities. And so once you get inside of 5 feet, you start getting into another building code, or you have to start fire rating the walls according to the building code. And of course, the roof overhang can be 2 feet, so now that's only 3 feet from the property line. And I think once you get inside of 2 feet, that you can't have an overhang at all, if I remember the building code right. So those are the three scenarios that I was thinking of: the smaller lots, building. And when you build two residences, let's say on the same lot, then you have to have an imagined property line between the units. Wildfires, and it's really rare, but like I say, I have read some articles, I've attended some meetings where there's been some studies done about fire rating buildings in the smoking areas. Anywhere else that we've got to think about how we construct our roof overhangs to protect ourselves from fire? Have I missed any?
Well, I don't think you missed any yet. The overhang issue is a big one that has been forgotten or missed during plan review processes from time to time. Unless things have changed, there's no UL fire rating for roof structure overhangs.
All right, hold that thought, because I want to go back to Paul Cole. Paul, can you hear us yet? All right, I've got you muted. So there's a button with a microphone.
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, good. We can hear you
Hey,
too.
Paul.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. It's good to see you,
Appreciate
man. It's been a
it.
while.
And,
We missed you in North Myrtle Beach.
yeah, I tell you, life's been life.
All right. Well, thanks for bearing with me while we got started there. Um, yeah, here's what I found in the building code where it talks about, you have to have one side, 1 hour on the underside of the roof, but then there's some exceptions. One is that you can provide fire blocking that goes from the top plate of the wall to the underside of the roof. And I think I found an example of that here, which would be this blocking here. Is that correct?
Yeah. Actually, I think it's the one further towards the intersection of the rafter and the wall.
This one.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a space between, but then again, maybe.
Well, part of the problem with that detail itself, it contradicts the other part of what's necessary is ventilation for the attic to vent.
Exactly. Now, my question would be, I'm hearing, a lot of people using spray foam for the insulation that sprays up against the roof
Right.
decking.
We do a lot of that.
And that causes an enclosed system for the attic space.
Puts it as
But the
part of
building code,
condition-
I'm sorry, what'd you say,
puts it as
Paul?
part of the conditioned space, yes.
So how does the building department, I mean, if the code requires that you have a vented attic, how do you get away without having attic vents?
Right. That's.
A
I
lot of
think
that.
that part of that is you need your ventilation percentages. You have so many air changes by attic vent or so much area by soffit and roof vent based on the building square footage is one issue, and where those vents are is part of that. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be consistent, but what you're really talking about is if the designer doesn't know where the overhang is and where the building setbacks are, it doesn't plan for that, then you're in a position where you have to react to an existing condition that you should have designed yourself out of that from the beginning. But you can't always, if you're doing a renovation or something like that on an existing building. That's hard to do. So it's the two-part process. If it's new construction, the designer is responsible to make sure that's right. If it's renovation, then you got to know how to handle that. And some of those details that we're talking about will come into play.
Larry?
Well, whenever I looked at that detail and we were talking about, fire, I have built plenty of buildings that had, I'm going to call them parapet gables. What's the name that you use? You know what I'm talking about? A gable.
I think so, like in a mission style.
Like in a French house, they have the
A
parapet
French house
gable.
would have it. Mission style would have a like a Dutch gable.
No, not at all. It's a
No?
gable. Okay, so see, it's a gable that goes up, and so you're slammed right up next to another unit, but the gable goes up higher than the roof. Okay, the gable goes up higher than the roof to the adjoining townhouse.
Parapet wall goes up higher than the roof.
Yes,
Right.
the parapet goes up higher than the roof. So I think that anything that has anything to do with fire, I think that we need to be looking at it. And one of the best things that I've seen lately is a screen that you can cover your shingles with. It keeps the embers from just being able to lay on a asphalt shingle or whatever. And so, but it's like, I'm going to say transparent almost, because you can't hardly even see it. I said, wow, that's pretty good. Look at everything. Everything is burned up, and we've had some fires here. Look at California. They almost burned down this 6 months. So fire is huge deal.
So is the screen something that is permanently installed on the house, or is it something that you, as a homeowner, you've got to be home and install it?
No, there are companies that install it. I haven't gone that deep, but I think it was just a galvanized short staple that like a slap tacker that you'd put up visqueen with. So, or that it's installed with.
But it's not permanent. You don't build the house and leave that screen up there all the time.
Yes.
Oh, you do?
It's there. Mm-hmm.
I just Googled it, and there's Wild Defense Mesh, and it's a flame and ember mesh screen. That's cool. It's 1/16 and 1/8 inch wire mesh. Huh. Learn something new every day. Love it.
Yeah, I would imagine if you use a metal roof or even a fiberglass shingle roof should be fire retardant to a certain extent. Cement tile roofs for sure, but in the case of a wildfire area or the potential of wildfires, I would imagine the best route to go is some kind of foam insulation system where you would have zero attic vents, just totally enclosed system. But in the case of a property line issue where it's just one side of the house or maybe the two sides of the house that have to be rated, is it possible to get enough intake from just the front and the back with an exhaust through the ridge, let's say?
Well, you know what's cool is whenever I looked up Larry's mesh, there's a 3-inch round fire stopping vent mesh faced for attics.
Another one that I found was called Vulcan Vent.
Yep, this is it. Vulcan 3-inch fire. Yeah. Am I getting ahead of you? Sorry.
No, I don't know if you're getting ahead of me. It's just one I had bookmarked, but they had, a bunch of different details on their website. Now, by the way, Vulcan is not a member of AIBD and they're not a sponsor of this program. But they have, like the standard screen vents, the continuous screen vents. Here's one with a wood soffit. But the thing to keep in mind with the Vulcan is that I looked up like a 7-inch, and they don't give you at Home Depot what your what's the acronym, the NFVA, the net feet vented area. But they say it's 7 inches by 16. So I don't know. I didn't get my ladder out and measure any. I think my house may have these, but I would have guessed that the actual area is like 6 inches by 15 inches. So you're looking at it like 70 square inches. But do they count the 70 square inches, or do you have to deduct for the screening? Because if you have 1/8 inch screening, then from my research, you have to deduct out 25% of that 70 square inches. But if you have 16th inch screening, then you have to deduct out 50%. Does anybody have any experience with what the inspector or the plan reviewer? Because I do have one municipality in Florida that I've designed in where they actually require that we put the location of the screen vents on the roof plan and then do a calculation to verify that we have the amount of square inches that are required, which is what, one in 300 based on the the ceiling area, I think it is. Another vent that you can get at Home Depot is one by GAF called, I forget what it's called. Doesn't have the name. Oh, Master Flow, the Master Flow vents. And they don't give you the specs on that, but somebody asked the question, how many would I need for 2,550 square foot attic? And the answer came from Masterflow, and they said that you figured 50 square inches. So when you take what size is this one? 16 by 8, and you get 50 square inches, you can go to the Vulcan vents, and they're 7.5 by, oh, here we go, 8 by 4. No, those are, I guess they have 7.5 by 22. I thought they had one that was a 16, one for 15 or 16 inches. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Is this the right? Yeah, that's. Anyway, they're saying that you're looking at 75 square inches. So I guess you got to be mindful of how much area you actually have, but because that looks like a pretty heavy screening.
Well, you never know how many square inches you're going to get, because it's up to the framer. You have to turn your saw upside down, unless if you're going to do it after the fact, and you just cut four sides and stick it up there, and make sure you have enough to staple it on. And I've even seen framers put them on with no hole. Okay, because you can't see through the venting, and unless you're up against the house, and then it's real hard to see then.
Yeah, so, no, when I draw my roof plan and I show the screen vents on it, I show them between the rafters or trusses. They make them 24 inches long. Our trusses are 24 inches on center. So I design it so they can nail each end. Or yeah, there's one hole, I guess, on each end. You can nail them right to the bottoms of the trusses. But I've gone out in the site and I've seen where somehow they put them in the middle, and they're like straddling the truss, and the truss is taking out that 1.5 inches of vented area. So I don't know, maybe whoever came up with the 1 in 300 formula is taking that into consideration, thinking that maybe if we can get 50% of that really 1 in 600 is right, or 1 in 450, but we're going to say 1 in 300 because we know that not every installation is going to be absolutely perfect. But the last house I built, I had 1x6 tongue and groove soffit material running parallel with the wall. And then I had outriggers, or what else is another word for them? Corbels that were 10 inches by 4 inches that came out with a sculptured end. So I meticulously went around the house and I laid out all my screen vents on the wall, before they stuccoed, so that when I put my soffit up, I knew exactly where my screen vents would go, so that they would fall perfectly between the corbels. So that's pretty anal, but that's what happens when the designer builds the house. That's why I didn't make money as a builder.
Well, paying attention.
We had to deal with the.
Oh, go ahead, Vicki.
We had to deal with that overhang issue, according to the property line, with the habitat cottages. And I was just going through the old drawings from those, trying to find where we noted that it had to be a 1 hour fire. And I couldn't find it on, it was like 5 years ago when we drew those things. So I don't I don't remember. I know we called for a 1 hour eve, but I cannot for the life of me remember if I detailed it or what they did on site. So I couldn't help you there, but we did have to deal with it because the eaves were no closer than 3 feet to the property line. And we did have to cut back eaves on some of them because these were extremely narrow lots. And the houses were like 24 feet wide to 28 feet wide on little tiny lots. So it definitely was an issue. And here in Central Oregon, excuse me, wildfire is a huge issue. It seemed last summer that the entire state of Oregon was going up in flames. So at the state level and at jurisdiction level, they are getting really tight now on not just the construction of the house, but the landscaping, your safe zone around your house, how you have to prune up trees and get rid of shrubs, which is kind of off of our topic, but it does relate because this isn't just for new construction. How do you go back and assure that existing houses that are in fire zones are also going to be as safe as possible? And we're now, in fact, Bill and I are having an argument over how many low branches we're going to have to take off of our spruce tree because of its distance to the house. So it's another topic that in fire zones is becoming quite critical. So that's what I have to say.
Well, on the two issues that I was just thinking about, we talked about the vents and if an overhang is beyond that 5 feet, but you have the assembly of the material that makes that overhang. I've used a couple of products. I think it was the Georgia Pacific Dense Glass was one that has a rating for that system, but it's not only the soffit, it's the fascia board, and then it's also the roof deck that needs to be covered based on the code officials that have kind of told me where to go with that kind of detail. And the other thing is, this starts another totally different topic on fire zones. A lot of times right now we're talking about using a water drainage plane where we have keep the siding out from the actual subsiding and gives it an area for the wall to breathe. A few years back, going through being involved with some of the code hearings, I remember seeing a video where they were talking about this type of thing, and the horizontal cyclone of embers that are at the bottom of the house between the ground and the wall is tremendous, which opens up the other topic of, do those embers then go up into that drainage plane void area that people are trying to build into their designs now? So how do you keep the embers out of that? And that was I think it was through the Vinyl Siding Institute was talking about that, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
Because we ran into that issue on the use of vinyl siding in fire zones and whether it would be prudent to eliminate the use of vinyl siding in fire zones. And that was one of the things that I think that the Vinyl Siding Institute had brought up with that video. So the two issues, the whole soffit overhang assembly, whether it's a soffit or whether it's a gable end, doesn't matter if it's within the building, the 5-foot building setback that the IRC and many building codes adopt. And then it's the other places that fire could enter a building.
Well, I know the Vulcan vents, they have one for their crawl space as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned, the materials. LP Building Solutions, they aren't officially a corporate member, but I talked to them on Friday, and they will become. It sounds like they're becoming a corporate member.
Awesome.
LP.
Good.
So they make, and they've got a quick little video here. It's like 1 minute long.
We are here in the CI Live lab, and we're taking a look at two straightforward methods for handling difficult soffit and eave details, which are used in conjunction with fire resistance rated wall assemblies. On the left side, we have installed a solid block of dimensional lumber that spans from the top plate to the underside of the roof deck, per the 2018 IRC. Alternatively, on the right side, we have installed solid dimensional blocking on the fascia and soffit as a first step prior to finishing materials. Both methods provide the same durable fire-rated protection. However, there are slight distinctions in how they are built. While LP's flame block sheathing has not been evaluated as a fire-resistant component of a rated soffit construction, when a flame block wall assembly is used in conjunction with soffit protection methods, such as those shown here, it is possible to achieve a system constructed to conform to code requirements for fire-resistant construction.
So they do have the ratings on their products for that purpose, but in both cases, they have to. You have to still put that blocking in that the code calls for.
Mm-hmm. So then it's a matter of strategically putting in any soffit vents, and it might be that maybe it might create an imbalance. But if you lose 20 square inches of soffit vent where that overhang is into that 5 foot of space, make it up elsewhere where it's not in that 5 foot violation space. I don't know if I don't recall it in specifics where it says it has to be uniform as far as that even spacing of the soffit vents. But if you lose 24 square inches in a 20 foot span, and you move it to 20 inches elsewhere, you're still creating the same, or you could be still creating the same amount of percentage of ventilated roof area.
Is that you with a phone ringing, Mike?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Sorry about that.
Well, and I would imagine that we're creative people. We can come up with a solution for that when it's a property line issue. But I just wonder, is it better to design a house with a completely ventless attic? And is spray foam the only way to do that? And if it is that a good way to go?
I don't know.
Questions before we move on. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
Okay. One is, Michael, you were talking about horizontal cyclones at the ground, and that they move up in between the air gap, in between the siding and the sheathing.
It could.
Is there any fabric out there? We specify here on the coast. I think everywhere is a fire area. I mean, because we get, I think everywhere is a fire area. So it's kind of like, I know Oregon, California, all of those are in the spotlight, but I think everywhere is. So this hydro gap that we use, that we specify, is a drainable house wrap. But do you know of any material that would be fire resistant and house drainable wrap? Or because I don't specify other brands.
I don't know. I don't use too much of that, but I think the biggest issue is that, you don't know what the size of that ember is going to be. If you want to be able to drain moisture out of that cavity or get airflow from down low up to high, which is what you want to do, does it then become a chimney effect for
Yeah.
those embers if they get into the wall.
Yeah.
If you seal it off, and you could do that by a number of methods, solid blocking at the bottom with an aluminum or some other metal flashing at the bottom, but that invalidates the idea of ventilating that air gap.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a product out there that you just can't. It's so difficult to plan for every last minuscule element in nature that's going to hit you.
True. I can't remember my second question.
Okay.
Well, Larry threw in the chat box a link to wildfire defense mesh. So it might be a pain, but you can, actually create your own either vents or protection in the range screen area, I guess, by using that product.
I'll have to look into that. We don't have too many wildfires in Ohio, but it could happen.
Steve, that mesh covers the entire roof.
The entire roof. Okay.
Covers the entire roof. Okay, it's not just for some 8x16 vent in the soffit. I hope that's the one that I saw, because they had pictures, and it was like, well, that's
Yeah, I was just going by the photograph. I didn't actually read it, but it looked like she was cutting up small pieces.
Yes. Well, that may not be the one that I was trying to reference, but this one, it just covered the entire roof. So, and it really wasn't noticeable.
I wonder, on that mesh that covers the entire roof, what would it inhibit the solar gain if you have solar panels? Or would you have to not have it where your solar panels are?
I don't think it would. It wouldn't hurt the solar panels. I wouldn't think a bit.
No, it just might look unattractive.
Well, a solar panel isn't that attractive anyway.
That's a good point.
Well, I think you run into the other issues with this mesh. It sounds like a good idea, and it probably works really well for a simple roof. But let's say you got a roof with a 2-story house with dormers and intersecting valleys and all this sort of thing. It might be a little more complicated than just laying a blanket of this over a roof.
That's true, but how long ago were all the fires going on in California? I mean, this is
over a week.
Fairly recent. They lost thousands of homes. In fact, I was trying to figure out a way for AIBD to throw their hat in and with some kind of deduction to, help the fire victims, but still, take advantage of a catastrophe. Hey, man, I've chased tornadoes. All right, no, I'm serious. Yes, that's a terrible thing, but people need to get back in their houses. And of course, California has Title 24, but still, I thought, I think that there's something to be done with California that the AIBD could do that would help people get back into their homes. And it may be a situation where, with the upcoming recession, we need to consider, because it's not going to be around the corner anymore. Now, that's not going to be happening. Okay, when the average average median house in America is $487,000. Okay, the first-time homeowner is not getting in it with 9% interest. Not happening.
Yeah.
So we're going to be hurt unless
Yeah.
we do something pretty creative here.
What you're talking about with regard to California wildfires is I was present when the Oakland Berkeley fire broke out and watched in amazement how quickly that turned into a tinderbox and why. And then looking at several other places that have had those kinds of disasters, the Southern California fires and such. Your recommendation to go in and offer services is a viper pit. I would tell you, it's a viper pit, and the reason it's a viper pit is because you're dealing with the insurance companies. You don't deal directly with the homeowners as much as you will initially have to deal with the insurance companies, because the insurance companies are going to be the ones that say, "Oh, this code is not included in this, so you have to design a house that meets their standard, that is basically a resurrection of the existing, but then you have to go in and you have to overcome all of the code upgrades or code requirements, or even the newly implemented code requirements that would be at the discretion of the municipalities." So before you go throwing your hat into that ring, I would really strongly suggest that you look at, you have to deal with the scammers, you have to deal with the insurance companies, you have to deal with a bunch of cross-reference of misinformation. One person will hear something, they'll tell somebody else it's completely wrong. You have to re-educate the population. You have to deal with all of that. It can become very time-consuming. And I personally have chosen to avoid that because of those reasons. Because you can get into a situation where you've got a contract, you can't get to your next payment level because you can't overcome what the municipalities are putting in place, or the insurance companies, or the homeowners. And oftentimes some of these projects are going to, the homeowners are going to want to do improvements and change things. They got a 20-year-old house that burned up and they're going to want modern conveniences and such. So it becomes not, and we're a general contracting firm as well. So we design and we build. And so it becomes very, very difficult to manage all of those elements when you're in the middle of sorry, my vocabulary limits me because I'm a contractor, but you're in the middle of a storm like that. I would just be cautious. I would just offer you a word of caution to jump into the middle of that kind of stuff.
And to that point, there's a lot of insurance companies who are refusing now to insure certain areas in California. Yes. I don't think that's happened yet in Oregon, but it may. And if the administration cuts back on what FEMA is capable of doing to help, there's another wrench in the monkey works.
Right.
A monkey wrench in the works. So yeah, it is a terribly complicated situation, and I don't think it's going to get any better, because with climate change, whether you think it's human impacted or not, it's happening, and areas are getting drier. The temperatures are getting hotter. The ability of local departments and Forest Service firefighters, Forest Services being cut by the government employees, which is going to affect the amount of people fighting fires. It's a mess.
Well, so just so we don't go down that rabbit hole, I think as designers, we have to be cognizant of the location that we're designing to and direct our clients the best way we can for knowing what the environment is in their location right now. Global warming or not, lack of water or not, lack of firefighters or not, lack of whatever is irrelevant. Our responsibility as designers is to stay abreast of the requirements and the locations for that client, and to do our best, knowing what those situations are, to direct that person so that they can get a new home. That's what I believe our responsibility as designers are.
There's got to be somebody out there taking advantage of the of this situation and developing some kind of a deployable blanket that would extend from the ridge of a house down over the sidewalls, over the eaves. That would be, for lack of a better word, an asbestos type of product that stops the fire, like what firefighters use when they're in the forest and they have to cover themselves up and shelter in place. Somebody's got to be working on that. With all the insurances issues and all that kind of stuff, we as designers might be able to locate somebody like that and become involved in that.
Well, there is a product out there that I've seen advertisements on television for your kitchen fires.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
It's almost the size of a kitchen towel. You just open it up and throw it over the burn, and it immediately puts out the fire. So if there's a way to have some kind of an assembly that you push a button and it unrolls and goes over your house and then laps it over to keep the fire out, that's not a bad idea. And I'm sure that someplace, somewhere, it would be tried.
Yeah.
I have a question about siding. Here in our area, everybody's using fiber cement siding, which has a certain amount of fire resistance to it. What do they use in your all areas?
In Ohio, we use fiber cement the same way. We use a lot of the LP smart siding. Don't use a whole lot of the cedar or redwood that we used to use, but those are two of the predominant. My only problem with the fiber cement is, and I don't know if they've fixed it, but it shrinks, and it's so thin it takes on the same characteristic as the stud wall beyond, so you can still see that wavy wall. It is what it is. It's it doesn't burn as fast as the fiber cement doesn't burn. The LP smart lap system will burn. It nowhere near as quick as cedar, but you don't have a whole lot of choices. Brick is always the better choice, in my opinion. But that's Ohio.
Yeah, brick doesn't get used here. Most people here are using the Hardy products.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, brick, and I don't know that anyone has used vinyl out in our area. It's just not a thing.
Now, fiber cements manufacturers, they were making, especially Hardy, was making a thicker board. But I think that they ran into a lot of issues with people hesitating because it was so thick, trying to just cut it.
Are you talking about Artisan?
Yeah, the Artisan.
Yeah, we use Artisan a lot here.
Artisan, their Artisan product they were using a lot of that, or recommending to use a lot of that on like corner boards, window trims, and stuff like that, because it would stick out beyond the lap of the siding. And then the Artisan was also heavier because you could use it as a mitered corner instead of using corner boards.
Yeah, you could weave the corners. Yeah.
So that was a good product. That was a good idea for it. I don't if you're using a lot of it, great. How's it going?
In certain subsectors of luxury subdivisions that we have, you have to use Artisan.
Okay.
Steve had asked a question about spray foam insulation, and it's not. I was wondering y'all's opinion of rock wool, because that's non-flammable. I have an old house, and I want my house to breathe. It has to breathe. So I am starting to replace my fiberglass insulation with rock wool, and I was wondering because it doesn't burn. Right. So I was wondering what your opinion was for that as an insulating property. The spray foam is going to melt on you.
Yeah.
If it gets
Rock-
hot.
The rock wool I've used in the past, also another product similar to that called New Wool.
Yeah, I know New Wall too. Yeah.
Um, the thing about it is that I've run into, if you try to do a non ventilated attic or a conditioned attic space, you need something that's going to give you that R value
Yeah.
for that roof deck. And I don't know if the rock wool or New Wool would meet that. I mean, we're R49 in Ohio. I don't know if you can actually get that high with a
You can.
type application. You'd have to do a eye joist or something like that for your roof deck,
Yeah.
your
You
roof
can get it.
structure.
It's just it
Then
doesn't burn. I wonder if it could. I wonder if it could be a barrier. No, you probably wouldn't want to stack it. Never
Yeah.
mind.
the other part of using a bat type application is would they still support it without ventilating it?
Yeah.
Because that's usually in an attic space. It's ventilated or it's got at least some air movement to it. And I don't know if they would or not.
Yeah.
They being the manufacturers of the product. But that goes back to the idea of sealed attic space and then conditioning that attic. It's the volume of air that you need to control. Of course, if you have the sealed attic, then you don't need to worry about soffit vents.
Yeah. In historical homes, you don't seal.
No. The historical homes, they leak like a sieve. So you got
They
air
also
changes.
burn. They're all kindling.
Yeah.
Pamela, have you considered cellulose insulation? It's it won't burn, and no bugs or termites or rats, and nothing will live in it. So,
Doesn't it compress?
um,
In cellulose free, like blown in, where it'll compress over time.
it will compress. The only problem they had with it, and this is 25 years ago, was that it at the top it would start sagging down. But I think that they have taken care of that. But it's a class A1 fire resistant insulation. I don't know why. Well, now with foam, I'm a foam believer, but I don't know why people, didn't jump on that cellulose. I did. I got away from fiberglass altogether.
We have some blown insulations now that are mixing a glue type into it. And so it's basically staying in place. New Wool is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what manufacturer it is, but you spray it, you put up like a netting on the inside, and then you blow in through that netting the insulation material. Anything blown in has a potential to settle if it doesn't have some kind of a binder to it that keeps it rigid once it sets. In the older days of cellulose, you used to go into a house and renovate this house. You pull the wallboard off, and the first 8 inches is where the cellulose had settled, so there's no insulation at the top 8 inches of the house. But over time, they've got now some binders that once it's settled in, that's not me. So it won't settle. So it means you have to watch the material and check the manufacturers on it.
Thank you. You can tell I'm protected by my dogs, right? Sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right. Well, we've only got about 8 or 9 minutes left in the hour. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Why aren't more CMU houses built just for aesthetics? And I mean, because
Cost.
they're, or like, has anybody studied what, like, because I'm in Hurricane Alley, I study what houses made it through the major hurricanes, but I haven't seen anything on the news or online about any house that withstood any of these fires that we've had, besides luck.
There was one that I read about in the Malibu, not Malibu, was the fire in Hawaii, Maui, the Maui fire. There was one house that still existed. It had a tile roof, stucco exterior. There was an article on it. I can't remember if we did like a midweek vibe email about it, or if
I'll
it
look
was
for
just a link that we put in the Monday Minute. But I remember trying to spread the word on that. But what the homeowner had done, they had just bought the house 2 or 3 years prior, and they went through and got rid of the vegetation. Put fire friendly planting beds down around the base of the wall. But yeah, there was one house. You look at the block and it was like everything burned down, but this one house on the ocean sticking up that still existed. And it really wasn't anything special with the house other than it was built out of non-combustible materials, but the homeowner came in and removed everything from around it that would be attracting fire.
That's what they're encouraging us to do up here, is have your fire safe zone. I remember years ago when there was a bad fire in Oakland, and this is probably 10 years ago or more, there was a photograph of one house standing, and it was made out of autoclave aerated concrete. And I did one house up here of AAC, and there was a couple others that were built, but because it's so hard to source, it never became used out here. And that's a real shame, because it's a very good product and it's fireproof. There was a demonstration of it with a piece that was, maybe this thick. And you could put a flame under it and not feel the heat on the other side, period. It's also sound resistant. It's just that I think there's only one manufacturer now that's across the border in Mexico. There used to be a factory in the Atlanta area, I think. But it's a shame that product never took off, because it's excellent.
Wow.
There's the one house that stood after the Maui fire.
Wow, there it is. Yeah.
Survived because of its metal roof and lack of vegetation along its drip line. And they just got lucky. But there's the overall view after the fact.
Well, it's interesting. I have a client that's in LA, and they had a house that survived, and the reason it survived is the drip line vegetation. They pulled that back, and they backed up to a hill, but they had a tile roof, they had stucco siding, and they actually had a stack of firewood that had caught on fire and fell against the house, and the stucco, and it was right next to the gas meter of all things too. But if there was any chance for this thing to go up, they provided it, except for they removed vegetation, and they had put in the soffits. They had put stucco in the soffits with the continuous vents. So it's the lack of that flame, because when you were talking, Pamela, when you were talking about the CMU houses, those are fine, but the roofs and the attics are usually built with wood trusses.
Yeah.
And that's where that fire gets to these houses. There was a house that Vicki, you were talking about. There was one that the news station focused on from a distance, and it withstood just hours of flames, and finally succumbed when the flames next door, when the flames from the house next door got up high enough and actually got underneath its eaves, and that's where it lost its battle. So the eaves that you were talking about, I was late to the meeting, sorry, but when the eaves you were talking about earlier, that is your first line of defense for all of this, in my perspective, is that you've got to protect those. Once you protect those and keep those either flame-proof, fire retardant, or non-existent, then that's going to be your best defense for these fires.
Well, I think we've gone all full circle then. Thanks, Scott. Bringing it back to the eaves. So good to see everybody. Paul Cole, thank you for being here, man. Don't be a stranger.
Oh, man. Try to get back into this.
How's
No,
things
appreciate
in
seeing her.
Buford?
And still busy as all, so can't complain there. So,
That's good. Still making your own beer?
hadn't had time. Just
Okay.
Even better.
trying to cut back a little bit. I'll make
Yeah,
it,
I
I'll
hear
drink
ya.
it. So can't let it go to waste. I mean,
No.
you
All right,
gotta make
guys.
it
Well,
up.
what I'm working on for next month is I had a meeting yesterday with Block It, made by Kimberly Clark, which is a building wrap that has the rain screen built in. So we're going to have somebody joining us from Kimberly Clark, and we're going to talk about rain screens. Not a webinar, not a formal presentation, but whatever kind of discussion we can derive from
When?
talking about Build It.
When is this?
This will be 1 month from today on the next High Performance Homes team,
Okay.
the third Thursday of May. So put it on your calendar. I don't know what that date is, but third Thursday of May. And
May 20th.
remember that ARDA call for entries is open. So check out residentialdesignawards.com. And we should soon, I think we have a meeting tomorrow to work out the pricing for the summer conference in Asheville. So once we get it, I'll give you a heads up. It's going to be kind of expensive, but it's going to be very cool. We have some great exclusive events planned for the Biltmore estate. Dinner and a tour, but gosh, they want a lot of money for that. So
Imagine.
Everybody wants a lot of
Is
money.
that a voluntary add-on?
it will be, yes. It'll be an a la carte item. But
I'm still figuring out if I can even afford to fly back there.
but we hope to have the registration open for Asheville in the next week or two. What else is going on in AIBD? Board of Directors is looking for nominations, aibd.org/board form. And don't forget that you can find out all of this information, as Garrett reminds us in the chat box, by following aibd.org/Monday Minute.
Well, the April
That's our-
20th thing too, we just got the email on. That sounds exciting.
There's a lot happening. So
Yeah.
Garrett hit the nail on the head. aibd.org/Monday Minute. That's where the information, all of it, as best as we can cover it, will be found. So the only place you need to go, he says.
There you go. One-stop shop.